Welcome to Secured with Dr. KJ, the podcast where we break down cybersecurity, the technologies driving it, and the companies shaping our digital future. I'm your host, Dr. Kenneth Johnson, cybersecurity leader, technologist, and strategist. Cybersecurity isn't just an IT concern, it's a business imperative. Each episode, we'll explore key topics like cloud security, zero trust, AI-driven defense, and more. We'll assess how tech leaders are adapting, where they need to improve, and what it takes to stay ahead of evolving threats. This podcast features expert insights from security professionals, industry leaders, and technologists, offering real-world solutions to modern cybersecurity challenges. Whether you're a business leader, security expert, or just curious about how technology keeps us safe, this podcast is for you. Subscribe and join the conversation as we explore cybersecurity's biggest challenges, securing tomorrow, one episode at a time. Today on Secured with Dr. KJ, we're tackling one of the most persistent and costly challenges in cybersecurity, ransomware. And there's no better person to help us navigate this conversation than James Ringold. James has spent over 20 years in the information security industry, helping organizations across sectors like aerospace, defense, retail, nuclear energy, and electronic discovery, rebuild and recover from major security events. A former CISO, security architect, and incident responder, he's been at the forefront of developing mature security programs that align with business outcomes. He's also an established voice in the industry, having authored pieces in Information Security Magazine and maintained his CISSP certification since 2004. James holds an MBA from Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota, and most recently serves as the Cloud First CISO at Westinghouse Electric Company, where he led their secure cloud transformation strategy. Now at Microsoft, James continues his mission to ensure that security is a business enabler, not a blocker. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, KJ. It's real good to be here.
Looking forward to the conversation, man. So let's dive right into the first question. So ransomware has evolved significantly over the past few years. What current trends are you seeing in the tactics, the techniques, and procedures of today's ransomware operators?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ransomware has been a scourge on the planet for a while, and it's something that every business is worried about. It is one of the fastest growing cybercrime areas in the world right now. Currently, I think projected damages are scheduled to reach $57 billion in 2025. And I think the forecasts are, up to $275 billion by 2031. The challenges are crazy. We're seeing ransomware obviously evolve, and it has evolved over time from just, spraying out ransomware and hoping people click on it to human operated ransomware, which is something, that we cover extensively at Microsoft, to this new like triple extortion tactic thing, where it's not just, encrypting the data, but they're now, threatening to steal the data. They then look at leaking the sensitive data. And then, for individuals, they're even getting into blackmail where, they're looking at, finding your CEO and blackmailing that individual within the organization, looking at different ways. So it's evolving, and it's a really starting to be a high value business. We're also seeing area like AI enhanced attacks, right? Where, AI is used to automate phishing and evade detection. They're looking at payload optimization to be able to really focus in those and drive success of their attacks. And that is really starting to change how we can defend against AI and the things that we have to do. One more area that's a big challenge is ransomware as a service. And this is one that's been on the radar for a while, where, it's not the people who are getting the ransomware as the challenge. It's people are developing ransomware and developing a way to be an affiliate and then monetize a percentage of the take, where they're being a software provider and developing a supply chain, if you will, of attacks and attackers.
No, I love it. I mean, that was my follow-up question, just to be clear, the ransomware as a service. That was my follow-up question. But I love it because it still springs additional questions. knowing that we have that ransomware as a service, what about the threat landscape? How is the community, and I mean the security community, handling stopping these ransomware attacks with Gen AI in in the fold? What are we doing out here?
Yeah, so looking at the ransomware as a whole, first and foremost, it ends up as a risk problem, right? The attackers are using the same techniques as always to get in, right? Unpatched software, known vulnerabilities in outdated systems, right? Legacy systems and older infrastructure that we haven't patched or cannot patch and still choose to keep online and active. um, Management challenges that we've had in the past, and not having visibility into what's in the environment, whether that be something that is in a data center that's legacy, or in an operating plant or facility, or if it's something where it's endpoints that have been offline for a while and come back on. A lot of those things are contributing to the challenges, and really, that hygiene that we keep talking about day in and day out, right? Patch management, asset management, things like that are areas that we need to focus on. And new technologies are allowing us, with leveraging LLMs and advanced analytics with machine learning and Gen AI. We're able to see those misses in our environments at a faster rate and then take action on them. Leveraging things like Gen AI and the response process to identify what is the highest risk asset, what are the capabilities and attacks that are going on against those, putting together that attack portfolio to really hone in on those threats that can result in those compromises, are ways that we're looking to empower that defense.
No, I love that as well. So when we're thinking about industries and we focus on, you could take energy. How are some of these attacks attacking that energy industry or any industry, and how are we utilizing AI to stop that?
Yeah, it's funny. I did a little bit of research before the call here, looking for the top companies that have been impacted by ransomware, and
Right.
two of the five top ones are healthcare organizations. The value of the data is what is driving these ransomware organizations, right? Knowing that personally identifiable information is under attack and is valuable to not only the business but to individuals and in the dark web on the black market. Those are areas where we're seeing, huge impacts in that space. When you look at service providers and areas that are helping other companies to impact and to fight against some of these threats. Those service providers have access into a number of different areas and have other companies' data in their environments and networks. So they're also being looked at as potential targets. And then, as always, manufacturing and industrial groups, just because the data is how they drive their business, right?
Right.
If they don't understand, what products and what capabilities are in the manufacturing line, and they don't understand the supply chain, they're going to have shortages and omissions in their business, and that's going to be an area that the ransomware attackers are looking to leverage. The targeting for ransomware is where can they put pain into an environment or pain into a company, so that the company has a better recovery in paying that ransom than they do in rebuilding and reimaging all the systems. And that's where the attackers are looking at who's at risk, who can they opportunistically go after that is a high propensity target to pay, and that's really what they're looking at for targeting. I don't know that there's an industry vertical that is targeted one over the other. It's really, do they have money? Are they willing to pay to get their data back?
No, that makes sense. Are you seeing the those threat actors and those hackers? Are they going in and asking for like Bitcoin? Is it digital currency, or is it, hey, you have to send a bag of money somewhere else to pay me off?
Yeah, it is primarily an electronic currency transfer, right? Anything that's untrackable, Bitcoin is obviously the number one. But there are other cryptocurrencies that are out there that are just as valuable. Hey, I may need, I may need more of that cryptocurrency to fulfill the ransom, and there may be more risk in acquiring that cryptocurrency as well as then cashing it in. But for the most part, it is something where the anonymous trade is the key to that. Even bags of cash can be tracked and transferred, especially if they're going internationally. It's one of those areas where cryptocurrency is an enabler even for criminals.
Agreed. No, I totally agree there. And so, from your perspective, how effective are modern security platforms at detecting and stopping ransomware across the entire attack chain?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you look at how you recover and, what are the areas that we look at for recovering from ransomware, first and foremost is you have to understand the devices that are in your environment and where the data exists.
Hmm.
Leveraging things like cloud and properly configured cloud systems is one of the greatest ways to ensure that you are able to recover if ransomware gets into your environment. I look at, in the olden days, we had file servers and tape backups, and nobody ever tested tape backups. Now you have, multiple copies and file versioning with online file stores, right? Regardless of what file store we're using, there's usually, a backup copy of that. There's a version file copy where you can go in and automatically recover those. And that's one of the things that I urge many companies to do is look at the online storage capabilities. If you're using, OneDrive or Dropbox or SharePoint Online, make sure that you have properly configured backup and recovery. Make sure you've turned on file versioning. Yes, it does use a bit more storage, but it's an online, recovery that you can, very simply get that data back or get a previous version of that current file back. And it allows people to really expedite their recovery and to democratize the user community to do their own recovery, right? If you just happen to delete a file, right, you can go back in and restore it from an online version very quickly. The other piece of it, I go back to is always, or promptly patching, patch, anything that you can patch, make sure that it operates and it's fully up to date. If new systems come online, make sure that you have the ability to see what they are. Use the zero trust methodology. When somebody comes in and if a new device is accessing your network and somebody is attaching a new device to your environment, make sure that you understand the posture of that, not only person, but the device and understand, through zero trust principles, moving to identity-based access controls, segmenting the network so that things that get in don't move laterally. And then the last two are super important. Real-time threat data, understanding where threats are coming into your environment, and then educating your staff. Like the biggest thing is understanding how somebody can see an email and recognize that it is phishing or a social engineering attack. Make sure they understand what they should do if they accidentally compromise or become a victim of a compromise. If they click on the wrong link and they see some pop-up that comes up and their system shuts down, make sure they know how to contact your help desk or your service desk and your security operations center so that they can report it instantly and you don't have something that is running through your system or running through the next person and the other people that they communicate with, sending itself out via email or even text messages and other online communication.
No, I love the sock thing. You got to go back to the sock at the end of the day, and allow them to be the, let's say, the captain in remediating and stopping those attacks. So no. What about education? You spoke on it just a touch. You said educating your team and yourself. So what are some of the things that you do to keep yourself educated on these ransomware attacks, threat protection, ransomware, just the whole gamut of security? What are some things you do?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I do, obviously I read a lot of the articles and the things that come out. There's a lot of top 10 lists and a lot of daily newspapers and feeds that come out. One of the things I stay on top of are the various threat intelligence and digital defense reports, right? Microsoft has a digital defense report, CrowdStrike has one, Mandiant has one, Cisco has one. Reading through each of those and looking at, what are the strategic recommendations within each of those areas. Also, just staying up to date on, other reports that are out there. If ransomware is a concern for my board of directors or for a board of directors of a customer, like guiding them to the various ransomware annual reports that are out there. Looking at and using AI to come up with checklists based on those reports to correlate them into a meaningful action. You could very easily use Copilot for searching and come up with a ransomware checklist to be able to defend against it. You can look at a different way and gather in different sources using those AI agents to go in and pull together those reports so that you don't have to go in and read all of them. Use them as a summary, ask them to create a checklist, pulling together things like threat intelligence and your vulnerability lists into that and cross correlating with an AI agent to ask it the question, hey, from this report, and this report, what are my top 3 exposures? What are the things I need to look at? And then you can add in from this vulnerability list, what are the things I could focus on? And you can really get AI to target those capabilities that you might miss or you might not correlate together because there's so much information out there.
James, you are out here dropping nuggets, so I might have to ask you on the back end to give me some of those links so I can make sure I stay on top of my education as it comes to ransomware and just security in general. So when you think about the advancements, we've done a lot of advancements in security and ransomware, threat protection, all of those things, but the gaps still exist. So where do you see some of the biggest weaknesses that enterprise ransomware defenses have, whether it's tooling, processes, or just mindset?
Yeah, the biggest one is that comes to mind is legacy systems, right? Every company has a legacy system out there. We've got manufacturing capabilities that we need to get reporting off of. We have control systems that run manufacturing capabilities that we're dependent upon. Medical devices that can't be changed, right? Control systems in government that have government regulation over them, where change management is very difficult. And the biggest challenge there is making sure that you're using connectivity and network segmentation to prevent malware and ransomware from getting to those highly sensitive, highly important devices, right? We talk about things, like using remote hosts and isolating systems, but we still have to get reporting and data back and forth between those. And it is more about having that understanding of where those connection points are between the attackers and the potential attackers and those sources of value. One of the biggest things that I recommend companies do is do a threat model. Stop in and take a look at how are your systems that have vulnerabilities and how are your unpatched systems able to communicate on the public internet, right? If you have endpoint systems that are missing patches, evaluate and invest in newer technologies to remediate that patch discrepancy. If you have systems that need to be isolated, make sure that your network controls and boundaries between them protect against those threats. Run things like tabletop exercises and network mapping exercises to understand those communication paths. Most of the ransomware comes in via phishing and email and instant messaging and text messaging, and then lands on an endpoint. So the endpoint being the primary perimeter and identity as that perimeter to control where that malware or that endpoint can access. Right, you need to be able to map through your environment. What is that threat vector? A lot of companies don't like to talk about it, but evaluate the role-based access controls, right? Evaluate areas where everyone in your company or in your organization has the ability to write to data and figure out if those are still necessary. Malware loves to sit in places that everyone can access and loves to hide in files that everyone can open. That way they can, they can spread their malware and spread the pain everywhere. And if you still have those legacy environments from times past that everyone has to have access to, or the whole company can read and write to, those are places that malware will hide and malware would go to try to proliferate itself. The other real big area is in ensuring that when you have authentication and when you are doing authentication of user accounts, know where that account is coming from. Again, back to the principles of zero trust. If you don't have multi-factor authentication deployed, or if you have poor password hygiene and entry point, those are big entry points for the attackers. The mantra that we have at Microsoft is attackers don't hack it anymore, they log in. We're doing a fairly good job of that. The unfortunate part is now we're just squishing that ball to put the attackers somewhere else, and they're going back to those vulnerabilities and going back to that patch management. As we've shifted, they shift. It is still very much the cat and mouse game.
No, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And so it's a fun, I would say, career to have, is to be in security, and especially if you're into stopping threats and making sure that we're all staying safe utilizing this. So I do want to ask you though, and you kind of jumped into this, but I want to really ask this question outright, is how do you advise companies to balance prevention with rapid recovery?
Yeah, that's a great one. There are very few companies that can do both really well and fund both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the balance of being able to understand, the highest level risk and the highest threat as it's coming in, and being able to move with the attackers as their tactics and success changes. We need to react to it. The hygiene component will always be a challenge and will always be a way for us to ensure that the attackers can't get that foothold. The least amount of access that your employees and that your people accessing your systems have can contain that so that you can respond fully. And that's a big balance, right? Being able to understand and remediate and do just-in-time access, being able to understand where people can access at any point in time, gives your defenders and your people reacting to those attacks time to do that response appropriately. When I was coming up in the industry, we had everybody with admin rights to their endpoints. We had a lot of domain admins in the Windows domains, and people needed admin rights to do their job. And slowly we've chipped away at that. There's still organizations that haven't been able to fully embrace that capability, and it's something where understanding your environment and understanding where those threats, again, back to doing tabletop exercises and threat mapping, understanding, hey, if the CFO gets compromised, does the CFO have access to everywhere in the organization? If a call center representative gets compromised, what access do they have across the organization? Your HR representatives, what access do they have? And being able to map those pieces is and understand the threats and the threat vectors for each of those places not only helps you to apply those defensive and those preventative technologies in the right place to meet the risk, but it also helps your defenders understand, if someone in HR gets compromised, this is the scope of that potential attack. If someone in the finance organization gets compromised, here's the scope of that attack. And then being able to enable your defenders to learn from those events and learn from those small scale challenges to really empower and protect the organization as a whole. Even if one area or one part of the company gets compromised and has a problem, you can still have a fighting chance to prevent a full-scale shutdown based on that compartmentalization and based on understanding that threat vector and that threat risk.
And that wraps up another episode of Secured with Dr. KJ. A huge thank you to James Ringold for sharing his deep, actionable insights into the evolving ransomware landscape. from ransomware as a service to AI-driven threats, and the critical role of identity, hygiene, and response readiness. If there's one thing we walked away with, it's ransomware isn't just a cybersecurity issue, it's an enterprise-wide risk. Defending against it requires strong fundamentals, continuous threat modeling, and a mindset that blends prevention with rapid recovery. Whether you're leading a SOC, managing identity, or advising the board, your role matters in building resilient defenses. If you found this episode valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Secure with Dr. KJ. More great conversations are on the way. And as always, we're securing tomorrow, one episode at a time.